Hello and welcome to Fast and Factual on Firstpost, with me, Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. Here are the top 40 headlines of the day. We begin with the latest on the Alaska summit, scheduled between President Donald Trump and Russia's Vladimir Putin. The White House has described Friday's summit as a listening exercise for President Trump that is aimed at gathering insight on possible ways to end the Ukraine war. Officials have said Trump will meet Putin at an Air Force base in Anchorage in Alaska, while they have also said that President Trump may, in the future, visit Russia. Meanwhile, Europe and Ukraine's leaders are set to speak to President Trump at a virtual meeting later today, ahead of his summit with Vladimir Putin. They are expected to warn the US president against any move that could undermine Kiev and Europe's interests in pursuit of a ceasefire. The unpredictability of how the summit would play out has fueled European fears that the US and Russian leaders could take far-reaching decisions and even seek to coerce Ukraine into an unfavorable deal. Ahead of Friday's summit in Alaska with President Donald Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin held a phone call with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un, where both leaders vowed to strengthen their cooperation. The two leaders reportedly discussed developments in bilateral ties under the strategic partnership agreed last year, while Vladimir Putin also thanked North Korea for its support in the liberation of Russia's Kursk region amid the war in Ukraine. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said American trade officials will meet again with their Chinese counterparts within the next 2 to 3 months to discuss the future of the economic relationship between the two countries. The comments came a day after the trading partners extended their tariff truce for another 90 days, staving off triple-digit duties on each other's goods. South Africa denounced what it called a deeply flawed U.S. report criticizing its human rights record. The U.S. State Department's annual report released on Tuesday said the African country had taken a worrying step toward land expropriation of Afrikaners and abuses against racial minorities. Pretoria said the report failed to reflect the reality of its constitutional democracy. The reaction came days after the Trump administration imposed a 30% tariff on many South African goods. Iran's top security chief, Ali Larijani, vowed in Lebanon that his government would continue its support, days after Beirut ordered the army to prepare a plan to disarm Hezbollah. Larijani said that Iran would stand by the people of Lebanon in all circumstances, as he arrived in Beirut to meet with Lebanon's president, prime minister, and parliament speaker. The visit came amid Tehran's opposition to the disarmament plan and after Hezbollah's position weakened following its war with Israel. New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon said that Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu had, quote-unquote, lost the plot as the country considered whether to recognize a Palestinian state. Luxon criticized the lack of humanitarian aid, the forced displacement of people, and the annexation of Gaza, calling the latest attack on Gaza City utterly unacceptable. The comments came after a small number of protesters gathered outside New Zealand's parliament, urging lawmakers to recognize Palestine. In South Korea, the former First Lady Kim Jong Un was arrested after a court issued a warrant over graft allegations that she denies. Kim became the country's first former First Lady to be detained, joining her husband, ousted President Yoon Suk-yeol, who is on trial on insurrection charges. Prosecutors allege that Kim engaged in stock fraud, bribery, and illegal influence peddling, including accepting luxury gifts that were not declared as required by law. Mexico extradited 26 suspected cartel members to the United States amid growing pressure from President Trump to crack down on drug gangs. Authorities said the prisoners wanted for ties to major drug trafficking groups include figures from the Jalisco New Generation Cartel and the Sinaloa Cartel. The move marks the second large-scale transfer this year as both countries work toward a new security agreement, while Mexico rejects any U.S. unilateral military action on its soil. A Guatemalan court sentenced 6 people to between 6 and 25 years in prison for their roles in a 2017 fire that killed 41 girls at a state-run youth shelter. The defendants, 2 former police officers and 4 former child protection officials, were convicted of homicide, mistreatment of minors, and abuse of authority. The judge also ordered an investigation into former President Jimmy Morales over the tragedy, which drew international condemnation and exposed systemic abuse in Guatemala's state shelters. And moving on to climate news now, Typhoon Podal has intensified and hit southern Taiwan on Wednesday. The storm lashed the region with at least 155 kilometers per hour winds and intense rain. More than 5,500 people were evacuated, while fishermen and residents secured boats and homes. Meanwhile, all flights and many ferry services were cancelled. The authorities deployed at least 31,000 soldiers for rescue and relief, and forecasters warned central and southern areas could get at least 400 millimeters of rain by Thursday. And Greece faces another wildfire as a fast-moving blaze forced the evacuation near the Kato Akia in western Greece on Tuesday. Strong winds and extreme heat fueled the flames across farmland and towards several villages. At least 50 firefighters, 8 aircraft and 2 helicopters battled the blaze, while police closed roads to protect residents. Authorities said it was one of at least 106 fires burning across Greece on the 12th of August. They warned that dry conditions and high temperatures could fuel more outbreaks. And neighboring France is also facing the brunt of the heat wave, with temperatures in the southwestern city of Bordeaux soaring to at least 41 degrees Celsius on Tuesday. Residents describe the conditions as suffocating and difficult to endure. The area remains under the highest heat alert for Wednesday, and scientists warn that global warming is making southern Europe's summers increasingly hotter and drier, raising health risks and the likelihood of wildfires across the region. In the United States, California continues to battle wildfires for the 12th day. The Gifford fire had burned at least 122,000 acres, with only 33% containment on Tuesday. Evacuation orders were in place for San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties. Over 360 engines and dozens of aircraft fought the flames. Meanwhile, the blaze had reached a mega fire status on the 11th of August, making it California's largest fire of 2025. However, officials warned that dangerous conditions could fuel the fire further. And Alaska's Juneau has seen a glacial outburst flood on Tuesday. The authorities warned residents to prepare for significant floods and avoid rivers. Water from melting ice and rain had overfilled the basin behind the Mendenhall Glacier, forcing it to burst. Time lapses from the United States Geological Survey showed rising glacial lakes over 2 months, and authorities installed at least 10,000 barriers to protect over 460 properties. And on to some business, economic and tech news now. Japan's Nikkei breached the 43,000 mark for the first time earlier today, as hopes of a U.S. interest rate cut following soft inflation data cheered equity investors across Asian markets. The highly anticipated US inflation readings showed that President Trump's tariff regime had yet to fully filter down to consumer prices. This sent markets higher, with the S&P 500 and Nasdaq finishing at fresh record highs overnight. Meanwhile, the US dollar weakened earlier today after data showed a modest rise in consumer prices for July, boosting expectations that the US Federal Reserve will cut interest rates next month. Investors priced in nearly a 98% chance of a rate cut, while President Trump's recent criticisms of the Fed Chair Jerome Powell also undermined confidence in the currency. And data showed Japan's annual wholesale inflation slowed for the fourth consecutive month in July, with the corporate goods price index rising 2.6% year-on-year, down from 2.9% in June. However, wholesale prices for food and agricultural goods continue to climb, in a sign of broadening pressure that reports suggest will likely keep alive market expectations of an interest rate hike by the Bank of Japan. And Boeing said that it delivered 48 airplanes last month, down from 60 in June, but 5 more than the year earlier. It was the company's most July deliveries since 2017, when it handed over 58 aircraft. Still, Boeing continued to fall further behind Airbus in deliveries after the European plane maker handed over 67 jets last month, despite its own challenges. Air Canada said it had declared an impasse in contract talks with its flight attendants union and requested intervention from the federal government. The airline warned of possible flight disruptions, having arranged alternative travel options with other carriers. The Canadian Union of Public Employees, representing over 10,000 flight attendants, rejected the airline's proposal for binding arbitration, insisting on a negotiated settlement. A strike could begin as early as August the 16th, after giving 72 hours notice. And Spirit Airlines warned about its ability to stay in business just months after emerging from bankruptcy. This came as weak domestic demand and shrinking cash reserves put pressure on its operations. The U.S. airline reported challenging situation, including tough pricing conditions, and announced plans to furlough pilots and to sell assets to improve liquidity. The U.S. Department of Energy announced the initial selection of 11 companies for a pilot program to develop advanced small nuclear reactors. The goal of the program is to have at least 3 of these test reactors operating within a year. This initiative aims to meet rising power demands from technology like artificial intelligence, while offering cheaper, factory-made nuclear power compared to traditional large plants. And Perplexity AI made an unsolicited cash offer of $34.5 billion for Alphabet's Chrome browser. The bid far exceeds Perplexity's own valuation as it seeks to access Chrome's billions of users. The startup said it would keep Chrome's open source code and invest $3 billion over 2 years. Perplexity hopes to leverage Chrome to compete better in the AI search race with rivals like OpenAI. Google has not responded to the offer and is expected to contest any sale in court. Amazon-backed Anthropic announced it will offer its Claude AI model to the US government for $1. This followed recent additions of Claude, OpenAI's ChatGPT, and Google's Gemini to the government's list of approved AI vendors. The CEO of Anthropic said that access to secure and capable AI tools was crucial for America's AI leadership. Rival OpenAI made a similar offer last week, making ChatGPT Enterprise available to federal agencies for $1 per agency for a year. And Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company announced it would phase out its 6-inch wafer manufacturing business over the next 2 years. The company said it would also consolidate its 8-inch wafer production to improve efficiency. TSMC added that the decision was based on market conditions and aligned with its long-term business strategy. And moving on to sports news, and we begin with tennis. Men's world number 2, Carlos Alcaraz, beat the heat and humidity as he advanced to the 4th round of the Cincinnati Open. The Roland Garros champion beat Serbia's Hamad Mehodovich in straight sets. Meanwhile, women's world number 2, Coco Gauff, also advanced to the 4th round of the Cincinnati Open. This as her Ukrainian opponent withdrew before their scheduled match. Gauff will meet Italy's Lucia Bronzetti in the round of 16. In men's doubles, the Indo-Australian pair comprising of Yuki Brambry and Michael Venus crashed out of the Cincinnati Open. The duo lost to a pair from Austria and Portugal, 6-3, 7-6, 10-4, in a round of 32. This marks the end of Indian campaign at the Cincinnati Open. An evening rainstorm and lightning spoiled the nighttime games at the Cincinnati Open. Due to this, Alexander Zverev and Jessica Pegula were left stranded in their respective third-round matches. Zverev was set to serve for the match against Brandon Nakashima with a 6-4, 5-4 scoreline. But just then, the match was forced off court by the threat of lightning. It was a similar situation for American Jessica Pegula, whose match against her Polish opponent was also suspended. And in cricket news, paceman Jayden Seales led the West Indies to a crushing 202-run victory over Pakistan in the third and deciding one-day international in Trinidad. The fast bowler blew away the Pakistan top order with a 6-wicket haul, as the tourists were bundled out for just 92 in a chase of 295 to win. The Windies had reached 294 for 6 in their 50 overs, batting first. Powered by captain Shai Hope's brilliant unbeaten 100. With this, the Windies beat Pakistan 2-1 in the 3-match series. India captain Shubman Gill and England batter Sophia Dunkley were declared the ICC Men's and Women's Players of the Month for July. Gill became the first male player to win the Player of the Month award 4 times. This after an inspiring run in England saw him score 567 in 3 tests. England batter Dunkley was her team's leading scorer in the T20 series against India. She also smashed a 92-ball, 83-run innings in the first ODI in Southampton. And former New Zealand batter Tom Bruce switched sides to Scotland. The 34-year-old played 17 T20 internationals for his native New Zealand between 2017 and 2020. And Bruce will debut for Scotland in the upcoming World Cup League 2 series matches against Canada and Namibia. Armand Duplantis bettered his pole vault world record by a centimetre. He cleared 6.29 metres at the athletics meet in Budapest. Sweden's Duplantis broke the world record for the 13th time as he soared over the bar at the second attempt to improve his own world record. And in football, Germany international defender Malek Theo has completed a permanent move to Premier League club Newcastle from AC Milan. The 24-year-old centre-back agreed a long-term deal for a reported cost of worth $40 million. And American Fred Curley, a 2-time 100-meter Olympic medalist, has been provisionally suspended for failing to notify anti-doping officials of his whereabouts. Elite athletes have strict requirements about informing anti-doping officials about their locations. They must provide a time and location each day to comply with rules regarding unannounced doping tests. And moving on to some entertainment news, Oscar season is about to kick into high gear with the fall festival circuit just around the corner. The deadline for countries to submit their international feature films entries is the 1st of October. And in the next 2 months, expect a flurry of announcements from around the world. On the 16th of December, the Academy will unveil the shortlist of 15 international titles, and these will be voted on by Academy members from all branches, provided they commit to watching all 15 films. Final nominations will be announced on the 22nd of January. And Netflix announced a new stand-up comedy competition series led by Kevin Hart, premiering in 2026. The 8-episode show will search for their next big names in comedy. Contestants will face rigorous tests from open mics to big stage performances. Hart will also serve as executive producer alongside former Last Comic Standing producers. Netflix said that the series will give a real behind-the-scenes look at a comedian's journey. Hulu released the trailer for Season 5 of Only Murders in the Building, premiering on the 9th of September. The show stars Martin Short, Steve Martin and Selena Gomez as amateur investigators in a New York apartment. Now, this season's mystery centers on the suspicious death of their doorman. The trio refuses to accept the police report and digs into a web of secrets. Created by Martin and John Hoffman, Only Murders in the Building became an awards magnet with at least 56 Emmy nominations and 7 wins across its 4 seasons. And franchise producer Jerry Bruckheimer said that he spoke to Johnny Depp about returning as Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean 6. The producer added that if Depp likes the script, he thinks the actor would do it. Meanwhile, Disney is still working on the screenplay with writer Jeff Nathanson. Bruckheimer called Depp a good friend and accredited him with creating the iconic character. The Pirates movies have grossed at least $4.5 billion worldwide since 2003. And Angelina Jolie reunited with her Mr. and Mrs. Smith director Doug Liman for a new spy thriller called The Initiative. Now, Universal Pictures was in talks to secure the project, with F. Scott Fraser writing the script. Plot details were kept secret, but the film promised a return to Jolie's slick action roles. If the deal closed, Universal executives would oversee the production. Now, Jolie's past action hits included Salt, Wanted, and The Tourist, making her a global box office star. And that's it on this edition of Fast and Factual. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to Firstpost.